Good evening, everyone, and a very warm welcome to episode 11 of the My Career in Tech web series. I am your host, Oluwademilade Abiru. This series connects the three MTT talents with experienced tech professionals. Today, we are joined by our guest speakers, Mark Essien and Anoma Moilolua. Mark Essien is the founder and CEO of Hotels.ng, one of the biggest online hotel booking agencies in sub-Saharan Africa. Anoma is interested in advancing Africa's prosperity through data, research, and innovation in the tech fields and in the fields of technology and education. She's currently building Women in Data Africa, a community that helps women get into tech. Our moderator for today is Treasure Okure. Today, we'll be taking you through a step-by-step guide as to how technical talents should go about executing their first technical project. Mark and Anoma, you are both welcome. And with no further ado, I would like to hand over the floor to Treasure Okure.
Thank you so much, Demi, for that warm introduction. And hello to our guests. It's an honor and a privilege to be speaking with you today, Mark and Anoma Moinoloa. So I'm going to start with Mark. The first question that I have regarding this space is, you've worked on multiple projects throughout your career. We have Hotels.ng, we have the HNG internship. And then there are also a number of projects that I've snooped on your website as well, including the 2010 hydropower project you worked on in your hometown. So I would like to know, what skills or techniques do you think have fed into your ability to execute such diverse projects across diverse fields effectively?
Well, I think a big part of it is, just having an interest, a particular interest, and then studying and reading about it. So when something, for some reason I like something, I think I want to try it, I find, I have a lot of confidence in myself that if I want to make something or do something, I just need to read a lot about it and I'm going to figure it out. And I think a lot of people don't have that confidence, probably from school, where they felt, oh, I read and I didn't get it. But once you kind of overcome that barrier and really believe, okay, I can do it, then I think almost anything is possible. I also iterate very quickly. So I try a lot of things. The ones you see are probably the ones that worked, but there are maybe 100 that didn't work. So I try something. If it's not working, like I abandon it very, very quickly. And only when it's working do I stay with it. And I think the last part is also a lot of the things that I do. So there are other things that maybe are not so visible, but it's kind of the same process. So I know, for example, things like SEO, I know coding and how to work with a developer. So I keep using those same techniques over and over and over again on different projects. So I find that when you have one skill, even something simple like I can build a website, but you can do it on so many different aspects. So a lot of what I do is just really the same thing repeated over again, but just in different fields.
That's very interesting. Would you say that being comfortable with failure is something that's helped you execute so many things throughout your career?
Yeah, absolutely. Like it doesn't bother me at all. Like if I do something and it fails or it's not good or, somebody laughs at it, I just move on. Like I don't even think about it like 2 minutes later. So I think that's really, really important. Just some people don't do things because they're afraid of, looking dumb or, the whole thing. But I think if you just do it and okay, it didn't work, let's move on. Once that attitude is there, you can try so many things.
So many things. All right, thank you. I'm going to go back to what you said about techniques later on during this phase, but thank you so much for that insight. So, Moinoloa, it's a pleasure having you on this space. You're a data analyst, and you have taught a lot of people about data and how to be data analysts and data scientists in their field. So, I'd like to know, what was your first data project, and can you share some experience or what your experience was like executing it? What were some of the challenges you faced when you started out as a data analyst?
Thank you for that question. So earlier this week, someone asked me for my GitHub profile because they wanted to replicate some of the projects I'd worked on. And I just scanned through most of my projects there, and then I noticed that my first project was actually in 2021. That's about 3 years ago. And it was an Arrow project. It was meant to be an assignment to get the Google Data Analytics certification. Most data analysts are very aware of the certification. So yeah, my first project was in 2021, 3 years ago, when I just started my career, or when I just started studying to become a data analyst. And it was meant to be how many, just like a brief description, how many people bike around the US, basically. That's what the project was meant to be about. So who are the guys that are using the bikes? Who are the guys that are using like Google Maps, for example? Who are the guys that are doing it with a team and everything in between? I think it was not great because it was my first project, so I don't think it was great at all. But one thing that I did try to do was use like the end-to-end process that most data analysts probably know about. So gather your data, clean your data, and make sure that you're answering specific questions with the data set. Make sure that you have insight. You're not just creating fancy dashboards or shit. I did all of that, which was good practice, but I would say for sure that it wasn't great at all. Yeah, that was that was my first experience, my first
Okay,
project
so
experience.
all right. So what would you say were some of the challenges you felt like you faced while doing that project?
I think I was using Arrow firstly. I'm not sure why I decided to use Arrow. Most data analysts don't like to use Arrow. But I did like Arrow when I started learning. I learned Python, SQL, and Arrow, not at the same time, but like almost at the same time. And I did enjoy using Arrow, which is why I decided to use Arrow for my project. So I think that was not a good idea because even when I started applying, most recruiters rather could not relate to the project because they're like, it's an Arrow. We don't use Arrow in our organization. I have to ask you Python questions. And I'm like, sure, go ahead. I should have probably used Python for a start and maybe for a statistical analysis project, I should have used R, if that makes sense. So the major challenge was I didn't have as much help because most of my friends and people in my network did not know R. I feel like I was one of the many people in my network that knew R. I didn't have as much help. I I did not ask as many silly questions as I should have asked
Mhm.
my friends or even the internet. For example, I did it and I rushed through it and I posted it on my GitHub. I should have taken a bit more time on the project. I think another challenge would be that uh I mean when it comes to R, cannot you can visualize, but you cannot. I don't think maybe you can do it now, but then there was no way for me to take my analysis from Arrow into Power BI or into Tableau. And I feel like that was a bit of challenge because I really wanted to create fancy sheets and a fancy dashboard, but I couldn't do that. So that was also like a challenge. Like people did not want to take out time to read through the project and to see what I'd worked on. They were just asking, oh, where's the sheets? Where's the dashboard? What did you do? So I'd say that was a challenge, I guess. And again, I was also learning at the same time. I'd say that when you are learning for the first time and when you start practicing almost immediately, which is what I tell people to do, you you can give up easily, if that makes sense. So I was struggling. This was not a challenge per se with the project, but it was a challenge to my capabilities and to like failing, like Mark said, I didn't want to fail. And as hard as I was trying not to fail or to avoid failing, I knew that the probability that the project will fail was really high because it was my first project. But I like that I pushed through and I did finish the project. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I liked what you said about how you didn't ask enough silly questions. I feel like it really connects with what Mark said about being comfortable with failing and being comfortable with like being open to learn and iterate and be vulnerable with the learning process. I wanted to ask if you still use Arrow to like build projects or if you just stuck to Python.
Um, I will still use R. Yeah. And this is just putting it out in the universe. If it works, if it doesn't, I want to get my PhD eventually. And for most guys that like when you're doing your project, you have to use R, whether you like it or not, or even SPSS. So I'd say for a fact, definitely I'll still use R.
Okay. All right, great. Back to Mark. So, when launching a project, how do you pick the right people to work with, like to manage the teams? What sort of tips or like on team building and collaboration do you look forward to, or do you look into when picking the right people to work with?
Mhm. I've worked with a lot of people over the years, and one thing I've learned is this. I don't think that there is any one set of person that is magical, you know. Depending on you, a different set of people will work really well with you, and then the same person work really badly with somebody else. So I think like the most important thing is to find somebody who you basically can work really, really well with. And every team is different, every leader is different, every person is different. You need to kind of get that, get the right people. So I think that over time, as a manager, one kind of understands the type of person that one works very well with, and then can, you know, start identifying those people. I personally, I like picking newbies, so people that are just starting. And when interviewing such people or talking to them, to me, what is most important is that they understand very easily what I'm saying, right? It sounds so trivial, but there are some people I talk to and like we're not syncing. Our minds are not like I'm saying this, they're understanding that, and so on. So when I find like I can talk to somebody, they understand clearly and easily what I'm saying, they speak, I understand also, then to me, that's the kind of person that will fit into my team, and it's somebody that work well with me personally. And you know, the same person can work very well with somebody else, but maybe not with me. Um, so I think like that's the main way that I build a team. And I like internal promotion. So I don't really like senior people coming from outside. I like kind of people I've worked with and then kind of, you know, bring them up.
Okay, so from what you have said, I've gathered you need to know yourself so you can know the kind of people you can work well with. And I feel like you sort of prioritize passion over experience. That's why you like newbies, because you're
Correct.
passionate, you bring an energy to the team that is really different. So I think that's really cool. Do you have like any tips in general that are not related to who you are as a person that sort of guide people, or you think would guide people who are trying to like build teams on how they can best like collaborate?
So do you mean like people that are hiring a team or people that are working
Yeah,
inside the
people
team?
who want to like build a project, what kind of tips would you give to them on the kind of people they should hire?
I think that people generally, I like expertise. So if you have whatever your project is, you need somebody that is focused on it and like is an expert in it. And I personally also like more precise expertise. So rather than having broad generalists, if I have a project and it needs this, then I rather go with somebody that's done a lot of that before, and put them all together. You know, so that's in terms of the hard technical skills. But then you still need kind of the soft skills the team needs to gel. I think also people that are like a very ego-free team is good, you know, where people are not like very, you know, like they know it all or so on, but they can easily communicate with everybody so that there can be a good exchange of ideas. And also people that don't really like too much instruction. So people that basically give ideas, they can listen to ideas also, and then from there the team will form a consensus, not the people who need to be told all the time what to do step by step.
Yeah, so people who don't like being micromanaged, people who can work on their own.
Correct,
Okay,
yeah.
great. Thank you for that. Okay, back to Anoma. What are the key steps involved in planning and initiating a data project, and how can this be translated and implemented into other fields?
Other fields. Okay, let me start with I personally have like my own checklist that I use when I'm working on a data project, be it like a simple analysis project or a machine learning project or like a statistical project. I feel like the first thing I always do is have like a question, as basic as that sounds, like frame a problem, have like a question you're trying to answer, have like a problem you're trying to solve with your data set. Whenever I'm going through people's portfolio or their projects and I go through it and I ask them, okay, so what's the problem you're trying to solve? Oftentimes they're none. They usually don't have like a problem that they were trying to solve with the analysis, or a question or a set of questions they were trying to answer with the analysis. To just go straight into like cleaning the data and doing everything with the data. And I feel like I think it comes from experience. I think it comes from like working in corporates and like understanding that no matter what you do, no matter what projects you're working on, you have to have a problem you're trying to solve. So that's the first thing I do. And I do this by defining the objectives. I do this by asking myself, what would the solution be used for? Who are the stakeholders or the consumers that are going to benefit from whatever problem I'm trying to solve? What what are like the skill sets that I need for the project? What is the type of data that I need? Is it going to be structured or unstructured? What would the columns be like? What's the tech stack I'm going to use? So like having those kind of questions listed out and answering them before I start working on the project is something that I do. Then the process itself, I feel like it's pretty straightforward. Get your data. If you don't have like a data set that you want to work on, there are so many ways you can find data or you can get your own data. You can give out surveys, especially if you're working on like a socio-economic type of problem. You can send out surveys for people to fill. You can, I don't know, there are just so many ways these days. At the top of my head, I can't remember all the ways you can get data, but there are just so many ways online. From Twitter, you can scrape data from Twitter, you can scrape data online and everything. Yeah, so I'd say everyone knows the process of working on a data project, but oftentimes than not, everyone forgets the first part, which is framing your problem or having a set of objectives that you need for the project. In terms of translating it to other projects, I feel like, yeah, like even if the project is so for example, when I was in school, I worked on a project in Bariga. We helped, we wanted to build a toilet system for the citizens of a Bariga community. They didn't have a toilet system. So they were using the water, they were using the river to bath, to relieve themselves, to fish and everything in between. So we wanted to remove that practice of using the river for having their baths and for relieving themselves and also using it to fish at the same time. So what we did was we identified a problem, if that makes sense, and we came up with possible solutions for that set problem, and we came up with every other thing in between. But the first thing we did was identify a problem, which was then the problem we identified then was that the citizens were not knowledgeable when it came to hygiene. They had toilets in the community, but they just didn't use it because they didn't think what they were doing with the river body was harmful. So we identified that problem, and from there we were able to come up with solutions to discourage them from using the water body. So I'd say yes, it can be translated to other projects, depending on how you think about it. But yeah.
Thank you. I think that's been very, very elucidating. The most important thing that stuck out to me from your answer is finding your why, defining your why. And your why needs to draw a straight line towards the solution that you're trying to provide. And I think that's a lesson that can be transferred in so many different fields. So back to Mark. So the next question I have is this. In the execution phase, running into obstacles or roadblocks is pretty common, right? What key strategies or techniques have you implemented or have you seen being implemented by people you have worked with in order to navigate these challenges? It's pretty vague, but I feel like there are overarching principles that you could share with us.
Okay, well, I mean, I don't know every single principle, but I know what works for me. So, it's something that I actually discovered back in secondary school because I was not like I used to struggle with mathematics, for example, like I wasn't really great at that.
Same here.
So, one thing that I found was this, like I have a problem and I can't solve it. And normally, like I'm just trying and trying and I couldn't solve it then. And at some point, I kind of figured out like that I could solve it if I followed two things, or let me say three. The first one is trying to solve it in a different way. So if I try the same thing a few times and it's not working, then I just abandon that technique and I go and search for, is there another way entirely that I can approach this problem? And sometimes it's there, sometimes it's not there. Now, if that doesn't work, the next one would be just trying to solve a sub-problem that is adjacent, so a smaller problem that is somehow related, a part of the problem, maybe just beside and so on. So rather than hitting the problem head on now, just, kind of biting or nibbling from the sides in the hope that some kind of insights would come out of it. And then the third one would be talking to people, which is normally the most effective thing because there's always somebody out there who can do it very well. I guess it's often more difficult to find them than to do, but if you ever find them, then like it often solves problems really, really quickly. So those are the techniques that I have found they work very well for me. I'm not the smartest guy out there, but I will say like I hit the problem from so many different angles that at some point, the problem just has to succumb. The problem gives up and says, okay, I'm yours now.
Thank you so much for that response. Wow, I really, really learned from that. Anoma, I wanted to ask, so back to you. What role does collaboration play in executing a successful project, right? How do you ensure collaboration between different team members or different teams?
I mean, like Mark said, I don't think I am not the smartest person ever. Um, uh, so yeah, collaboration is very important. Where I work is actually a very big deal. It's part of the values of the organization where like they say it and they drum it into your ears. Collaboration is very key and it's very, very important. So for example, if I'm working on a data project, I cannot be the data engineer, I cannot be the BI analyst, I cannot also be the AI guy or the ML engineer. I can't be all at the same time. I mean, some people can be that, but personally, I cannot be that. So collaboration is very key in the sense that when there is like diverse inputs and there are so many key people that are working on a project, the probability that it's going to be more successful it's higher than when it's just me that is working on it or me struggling, not even working, struggling on it. Yeah, so I'd say collaboration is very key when you're working on a project, whether you like it or not.
You have like any examples of projects you collaborated with, like on that sort of got easier once somebody else was on board?
A very good example would be with my community, for example, we're in Data Africa. I wanted to start sending out newsletters every week. And at first, I was doing it alone. I was collating. So one segment of our newsletters is sending job openings every week, at least 20 job openings and 20 resources. That's about 40. So meaning at the start, I was actively looking for job openings and resources, collating them, designing it into like the newsletter itself and sending out. After I think about 3 months, I wasn't consistent anymore. And I'm very big on consistency. When I start to be inconsistent, it affects me. So what I did was the possible solution was to look for other people that were willing to, or people that were really great at writing newsletters and asking them if they could volunteer for the community, which at first I thought people would say no, which is very surprising eventually, because so many people were like, yes, I'm down for that. Please let me assist with this segment of the newsletter. And ever since then, I don't think we have failed. It's been probably a year now. I feel like every week we consistently send out job openings to everyone every week. So that's like a good success story.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. It reminds me of what Mark said about how sometimes you like the solution is just finding someone else who can do it better than you can.
Mm.
That's really nice. Okay, so back to Mark. You have worked on a lot of projects, and I feel like with projects, usually the sense of wow, we did this without really like sitting down to really measure the impact being done, right? So how do you measure the success and impact of the project? What key performance indicators as a leader?
So when it comes to this, it's always a bit of a tricky thing because often the outcome is really, really distant from the input. You're working today, but the outcome is like a long way away. And there are many things that can affect the outcome. Like people can work really hard, but they don't get what is what is supposed to come out because it's something that is not their fault, you know. So what I don't really like measuring the outcomes per se. I like measuring the input, but then tuning to make sure that the input directly creates the outcome. So let me give you an example. In my company, Hotel Senji, we do bookings for companies in Nigeria. For big FMCGs, Unilever, Nestle, all this kind of thing. And in order to do bookings with them, we have to talk to the people and say, hey, this is our service. Would you like to use it? And so on, right? So the people that are involved, I could measure them and say, your KPI is how many companies did you close? But that is not necessarily something that is under their control. They may not be able to close. Many things could go wrong. They meet the wrong person at that time. So rather, you can look at an input. How many emails did you send? How many key people did you find today? And then make sure that if I have 10 key people and I send 20 emails, then normally on average, I'm going to get 2 signed deals, right? So it is very easy for you to measure somebody and say, did you send 20 emails, than to say, did you sign a deal? Because between, sending an email is something 100% within their control. Signing a deal is not 100% within their control. So generally, I find that a better way to set KPIs is to establish the journey. If we did X, Y, Z, then we are definitely going to result in A. So, and then check, did we do X, did we do Y, and did we do Z? Just like Anoma said, sending emails, right? There's an outcome that is needed from the emails, but did you consistently send emails? So you can't influence the outcome, but you can influence if you send the emails. So my KPI method is usually around, what are the inputs? And then the managers should now make sure that those inputs are going to directly correlate with the expected outcome.
I think that's key. I also think it does an excellent job at protecting the morale of the people you work with, because there are so many things that we obviously cannot control. We live in an economy that can be sometimes quite unstable. So it's really, really nice that you have sort of thought about that. I feel like it connotes a lot of expertise. So thank you so much for sharing that. Back to Anoma. So I think I asked a question similar to this earlier. How does that analysis fit into the work you do for WIDA as a founder? So how does it translate into your leadership skills? What data analytics techniques or strategies have really helped you lead and guide people in your organization?
Okay. Let's see. I usually don't tell people that I'm the founder of the community, but by the way, I just say that I'm the DJ or something. So this might come across as a shock for some of the members. Yeah, I'd say the first skill that I think, no, actually, that I know that I've been able to harness really well is problem solving. Data analytics has the way of, especially when I was learning, for example, and I was consistent with it, I noticed that over time, I had a, I had a, I had a, how do I say this? It was better for me compared to the previous year when it came to problem solving. I was solving problems faster and more effective compared to the previous year. Even in like my day to day, I was coming up with solutions way faster than I was comparing myself to the previous year anyway. So I'd say that definitely has helped in my role with Twitter. I think creativity also. So for example, I don't like visualizing data. I'm not creative in the sense that I don't know how to create fancy, beautiful dashboards. Um, my best color is black, so I tend to like be very dark with like my dashboards and with my script. But after a while, I had to learn how to work on being creative. It's different from like knowing the analysis. You have to learn how to communicate such analysis to stakeholders. And unfortunately, stakeholders like it when things are very fancy and pretty so that they can consume it faster. So I'd say that that skill has helped in my role within WIDAR. I'd say critical thinking. Also because sometimes you have to critically think things through when you're working on a data project. And I'd say for a fact, especially when I started and I was the only one running the community, I had to make certain decisions. I had to think about the future, like Mark mentioned. I had to ensure that whatever decision I was making now will not just affect now, but it was going to be a sustainable solution in the sense that it was going to last for so many years and not just now. So I'd say those are like the key skills that I've been able to transfer into my work with Twitter.
Okay, so you mentioned problem solving, you mentioned communication. I think those are really, really, really key. You mentioned creativity as well. Would you say that creativity can also translate in other ways into resourcefulness? So for instance, when there are like issues within the community and things like that, being creative in how you come up with solutions, it's something that you've learned from like data analysis.
I would say yes. Yeah, I'd say that for sure. Like, God, I'm the least creative person you probably meet, and everybody knows this. Yeah, but I've been able to like work on like even with the newsletter, for example, if you check all of our newsletters, I do most of like the design, like the templates. In in previous years, I would never imagine myself actually doing any of those things. So yeah.
Okay, thank you so much for sharing. Um, Back to Mark. Could you kindly share your thoughts on the stages, factors that talents should consider when they're executing technical projects?
Yeah, so when executing a technical project, I would say, I mean, there's a lot of just basic stuff, but to me, the most important thing I find, particularly with code, I'm a software developer myself. Um, I think that people should always take a moment to read a little bit deeper into the current problem that they just solved, right? Because I don't have that much attention span. I remember like back in school, people used to read and read for hours and I couldn't. I can read like 20 minutes and then I'm like, okay, let me go watch TV or something. But if you face the problem in this moment and you solved it, or you did something and it's working, I think it's worth taking 20 minutes to go and understand the underlying theory, why that thing actually worked in that way. And you'll find that in the profession, that as you gather all those little bits of knowledge that are actually deeper, it all compounds. And then at some point you understand, like you can see an error that you have never seen before. But because you have so much different knowledge about how the whole thing is built, you can now easily get to the solution. So I think like that is the most important thing, like continuous digging in deeper into what is really underlying, like what is really going on there. So it's like mechanics, right? You see a lot of mechanics in Nigeria, and they know how to fix it. If this sound comes, do this. If you hear that, do that. But they don't understand what's really going on. So if it's a different problem, then they can't deal with it anymore because they have no underlying knowledge of how the engine is actually operating. So, but if they were more educated, which will happen in future, but maybe it's not happening right now, then they could always open a book and say, okay, that's how the carburetor works, and that's how this is flowing, and so on. Then they'll start understanding the whole engine at some point so deeply that they can very well diagnose and solve problems rapidly. So I think like those, just jumping in deeper, taking 20 minutes, 15 minutes, 10 minutes each time, it leads in like 2, 3 years to so much knowledge that you can solve a lot more problems faster.
Okay, thank you for that. Two things stand out from what you said, experience and curiosity. So like interacting with what you're doing over and over and over again will make you more attuned to what it's about, but then also digging deeper, being curious about why things work the way they do is very, very key. So thank you so much for sharing that. Back to Anoma. How do you measure the success and impact of a data project? What KPIs do you track?
That's a good question. I think the first KPI, okay. I think the first thing I will probably track is, did I answer the questions that I asked myself at the beginning of the project? Was I able to successfully answer most of the questions or even all of the questions on there? So for example, if my clients are asking me why in the past year our competitors like has managed to take 50% of our client base. That's like a question they want me to answer. At the end of the analysis, am I able to answer that particular question that my stakeholder answered? That's a KPI that I'll most likely measure. In terms of impact, has the project been impactful? It's not just about answering the question. Have I been able to identify trends and have I been able to understand possible solutions that I am going to recommend to the stakeholders that, you know what, the data is actually saying this. The data is saying that our customer service representatives are very, very incompetent. We probably need to train them, and data is saying this. And if we do this, it's probably will lead to most of our clients staying with us and not leaving to our competitors. So that's another KPI that I like to track. Has it been impactful? I've been able to come up with solutions to the stakeholders or to the customers. My own personal KPI is that did I learn something new or a
Hmm.
couple of things, a couple of new things. I used to tell people that sometimes there used to be a time, not anymore. I cannot go a whole day without learning something new when I'm working on the project. It's it's going to be very difficult for me to go through a project and not learn something new, if that makes sense. So another KPI that I like to set for myself is what are the new things that I learned? What is the specific new thing that I learned? What's like the documentation that I read about that I didn't know about before? What were like the new syntaxes or the new tricks that I was able to come across and implement in my project? So that's another personal KPI that I like to track. Now, organizations have their own KPIs that they want like their employees to track and they want like the person working on the project to track. But personally, these are like the key KPIs that I like to track when I'm working on a data project.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I think my favorite KPI that you shared is that I learned something new. It really feeds into the idea that we have to grow as we're working, right? You can't just keep doing the same thing over and over again. And growth is by learning something new. And I really dig that. I think that's really cool. So the next question I have is for Mark. You have so much experience working and building throughout your life and career. What resources or tools would you recommend to people who want to build their project skills, their technical skills, their management skills? Yeah, what resources can you share?
Well, I mean, generally, I think it's good to read, like just pick whatever else, whatever it is that you're doing, you should read on it. And uh, I find that if you read just one book, just one, it's normally like 80% of what you need. Then 100 books are the remaining 20%. So the big difference is actually going from 0 to 1 book, you know. So whatever it is that one is doing, one should just pick at least one book that is authoritative and read up on it. That I think is the most important thing. So for example, sales that I spoke about earlier, you can read almost any sales book and you'll get almost all the techniques. But if you read no sales book, then you'll be randomly trying all kinds of things and they wouldn't work. But you could skip all that. So for it's sales, there's a book called Fast Forward. I really like that book. When it comes to management, there's a book called High Output Management. It's by Andy Grove, the founder or CEO a long time ago of Intel, the chip company. So that's really good. And I think outside of that, one should just do its experience, right? Because all the book gives you the theory, then you actually try it out, and then over time you figure out what really works for you in your own style. But in general, I'll say a book is what everybody should read on the topic.
Thank you so much. Anuma, would you like to answer that question as well?
I like books, so I'll probably not mention books anymore. I'd say YouTube is such an underrated free, I don't know, it's an education platform. My career started with YouTube. My career started with binge watching YouTube. I became productive through YouTube. I learned how to be productive, to be self-disciplined. I learned consistency of YouTube. And I feel like it is so underrated. It's such an underrated platform, essentially. And I think everyone should check out YouTube. Not for anything else, but for I mean the education part of it is really cool. So I'd say that books definitely books have changed my life. Um, so I'd say like Mark already said, watch read as many books as you can. And even if you don't like reading books, like reading actually, there are audio alternatives that you can actually check out that you read through them because you're listening to them. I'd also say reading articles so much value from reading articles, like just reading, subscribing to as many writers as you can for the specific thing you're looking for. Subscribing to them and reading their articles is such a great way to learn and to grow as an individual. So I'd say do all that. I mean, listen to podcasts. There's so many ways you can grow as a person. There's so many alternatives now. Thank God to Obasanjo's internet. There are so many alternatives that we can leverage on when it comes to growing as a person. So yeah, reading, listen to podcasts, listen to books. Um, yeah, it's just
Thank
that.
you so much, the both of you. I agree. I love both. I love both books. I love YouTube as well. I think those are amazing platforms that help people grow. Okay, to my final question before we give the mic to the audience. What is your advice for people embarking on their first technical project? I'll start with Mark and then Anoma, you take the scene.
On the technical project, there are two types of projects. There's the one that is like you doing it as a hobby, just for yourself, and then there's the one maybe for clients. I'd say if you are doing it as a hobby, it's important to want to build something that you need or that you want or that you're passionate about, and then to scope it really, really small. So often people need like a positive feedback loop. So when you decide on something that's going to take you 4 or 5 years to complete, like you are going to abandon it at some point. But if you have an idea that you can complete maybe within a week, week and a half, 2 weeks, then you can actually do it, build it, put it on GitHub, host it, or whatever, and you have something. So you now have positive feedback, you feel like completed it, then you move on to the next one. So I think it's important to do as many small projects as possible instead of a few big projects. When it comes to doing the first client work, particularly as a newbie, I think there one should phase the project as much as possible. So discuss with the client and say, I'm going to deliver this bit by this time and this bit by this time and this bit, but really split it up into tiny bits so that the client can see it, give feedback, one can correct, do that, then move on to the phase 2, phase 3. The client is happy because they keep seeing progress. And it also, if you are new, you may not have gauged some things properly. So it allows you have very quick checkpoints where you can now quickly correct anything that may be going wrong. So I think those would be my two major tips there.
Thank you so much. Anoma?
Oh yes, thank you. Just like Mark already said, practice makes progress. Yep, nobody's ever going to be perfect, especially when it comes to technical projects. But one thing practice does for you is that over time, when you improve 1% at the end of each project over time, you become so good at what you're doing and you become probably the best, but not perfect. So practice makes progression, not perfection. Another thing that I like to tell people to do is ask your silly questions. Don't be shy. Don't think that don't think that the question you have in your head or the question that that's been troubling you for so many days is silly. It might not be silly. It might not just be that, oh, that's just your perception about the question. So ask as many silly questions as you can, especially when you're working in a team. If you're not working alone, ask as many silly questions. If you are, use Stack Overflow, use GitHub. There's so many amazing platforms where you can ask your silly questions and you can also find answers to your silly questions that has probably been asked before. So yeah, ask as many silly questions as you can. Number three, I'd say document. I use Notion, which is a great platform to document every single thing that I've learned. If you want to use an external platform to document all your projects, use GitHub. GitHub is such a great platform, or create your own website. So document as much as you can, have somewhere where you have all your projects that that you've worked on so that you can also see your growth over time. You can also see that, oh, I started from here and I've already gotten here in 4 months. So document and have fun. It's, it's underrated, but as much as you can, have fun working, which is why whenever people ask me for project ideas, I just tell them start with something that interests you. If you like books, go online and go to Amazon Reads and download data from there. If you like social media and content creating, script data of Twitter, of Instagram, of some of these platforms. Have fun while you're doing it. Yeah.
Thank you so much to both of you. I feel like this has been such an insightful session. I'm going to come back to listen to everything everyone said for the projects that I'll be building this year. Thank you so much, Mark, for taking out your time to speak to us. Thank you so much, Anoma, for doing the same. We have learned so much. So I'm now going to be giving the scene back to Demi so that we can take the questions from the audience. It was lovely moderating this session. Till next time, take care. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you very much, Anoma. Thank you very much, Mark. Thank you very much, Treasure. So from my end, I've been taking down notes from the audience to see what they had to ask. But first of all, I wanted to share a few takeaways I had from the discussion. The major takeaway I took was the importance of expanding your knowledge and being curious enough to like find out in depth what certain issues are, as opposed to doing surface level research, like the importance of being curious enough to go as deep as possible to understand the root of each problem. Another key takeaway was the importance of being confident enough to ask any question, no matter how silly or how smart you think it is. Like, as long as you're asking these questions, that's the best way to grow. So thank you very much for that. And lastly, I really like the way Anoma finished off by saying the importance of having fun and like being present in the moment. Because I feel like that's the most essential thing you could do with anything you're doing in life. So yeah, thank you very much to all of our speakers. The first question I noted from the audience was, can you share any memorable moments or lessons you learned from executing your first technical project that have shaped your approach to subsequent projects? So either Mark or Anoma, if either of you'd like to, oh, let's give this question to Anoma. So Anoma, can you share any memorable moments or lessons you have learned from executing your first technical project and how that has shaped your approach to subsequent projects?
I think I already shared like my experience in my first technical project and how it wasn't great. But I'd say that it shaped my approach to subsequent projects, because I learned from it. I don't know that it's like Mark mentioned about sometimes when you're done working on something, it's good to go back. I'm paraphrasing what he said. It's good to go back and check for like mistakes you made, what you could potentially learn from that project. It's something that I did then, and I noticed some of the mistakes I made, and like I implemented it in subsequent projects. If there's one thing that I'd say is a great giveaway is I was less afraid to I was less afraid and I was more confident in my knowledge about like data analytics, if that makes sense. Especially when you start, I don't have a tech background and I studied human resources in school, for example. So I had zero confidence when I decided to pursue a career in data. I felt really small at the start, and I felt like the lack of confidence also affected like my work and the way I talked and the way I communicated some of my projects. I feel like after that first one, even though it wasn't great, after like I published it and I put it out there and I got feedback and I got people telling me, oh, you should have done this, you should have done that. Subsequently, I feel like my confidence level actually skyrocketed after that. Like after the first project, I wasn't even able to communicate. It was so bad. I wasn't able to communicate what I had done. I'd spent weeks on it, but I wasn't able to like effectively communicate that, oh, this is the problem I was trying to solve. I just kept telling people that, you know what, go and check it out. Whatever you see there, come back to me and tell me like what you think about it. So I'd say for sure, my confidence level definitely skyrocketed. I'd say that my knowledge when it came to like working on projects also skyrocketed. And I'd also say that I have a more iterative process when it comes to working on projects. And I have like a process that I go through every single time I'm working on a project. I didn't have that at the start. I didn't have that during my first project. So yeah.
Thank you very much for sharing, Anoma. And the next question we have, this will be targeted, this will be for you, Mark. When reviewing a technical talent's first project, what are the key indicators you look out for to identify whether a talent is strong or not?
That is difficult because I review a lot of early people, and you can never really tell, right? It's like if you don't know, it's not because you are dumb or you won't know it in the future. It's just that you don't know at that point in time. So you can't tell based off one project like where this person will be. So what I generally look for are first, I have this training program, HNG internship. So what is most important to me is where the person was and where the person is over the course of that time, where they are learning. So it's not so much what they know at any one point in time, but how much are they learning? How quickly can they learn? That's really important. And the second thing is how much attention in general to detail do they have? So small things like you send me an email, is there a properly written body? Are there grammatical errors in there? Do you care about the detail? Because I really feel like us in our profession, we are craftsmen, we're like carpenters. It's important that all the little things are right. So somebody that cares about the details right from the beginning, even though they may not have much experience now, I know that ultimately they'll get good.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Thank you very much for sharing, Mark. Thank you very much. So Mark and Anoma, some of our audience members, they've been saying that they'd love to have you as mentors, or they'd like to ask you further questions going forward. What's the best way you'd say they can reach you, like via social media platforms? Would you say you're more active on LinkedIn, Twitter, or what space would you say is the best way for some of our viewers to reach you?
I would say on Twitter, so twitter.com/ or at @MarkEssien, MarkEssien. That is where I'm most active and people can reach me. But if somebody has something very specific that they want to talk to me about, they can always send me an email. So my first name, last name @gmail.com. I also work with, like a lot of people that in my company who just want to gain some experience. I don't mind taking in people every now and then. So the best way is Twitter, but also email works.
Amazing. And Anoma?
A big disclaimer is I'm terrible with social media, just in case anyone does reach out to me. I am so sorry in advance. I'd like to reduce my screen time as much as I can, but I think I'm active on quote unquote on the active on every platform. So it's Moyolua and Noma on every platform, LinkedIn, Twitter, TikTok, minus Instagram. My Instagram is okay, yes. So LinkedIn, TikTok, Twitter. Yes, so it's Moyolua Anoma. And email is also moyoluaanoma@gmail.com.
Thank you very much. Anoma, just to clarify, was that could you spell that out just so everybody knows how to find the page?
MoyinOluwa, then ANOMA.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Once again, Anoma, Mark, and Treasure, thank you so much for your time. To all of our viewers, thank you so much for listening. Next week, we'll be talking about, we'll be giving you a thorough guide as to how to handle the nerves when undergoing your very first interview for a tech role. Once again, thank you very much and have a great weekend, guys. Take care.